The restaurant was glowing with golden lights that danced off the crystal glasses and silver cutlery. It was one of those expensive places where every sound seemed softened by class and wealth. At the far corner table by the window, Adrian Lewis, the CEO of one of the city's top tech firms, sat alone, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's rent. But despite his power, money, and the life others envied, tonight, he felt hollow. He was supposed to meet someone, a blind date arranged by a friend who thought he needed a little heart in his calendar. Yet, as the clock ticked and the wine grew warm, the seat across from him remained empty. For the first time in years, Adrian felt something rare, rejection. Maybe it wasn't personal, but it still cut through the walls he'd built around his heart. Outside, the rain began to fall lightly, painting the window in silver streaks. He looked out at the city lights, trying not to show the disappointment that sat like a stone in his chest. He didn't know that fate was only minutes away from changing everything. Speech balloon: if you believe in kindness, second chances, and that love can find you in the most unexpected ways, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us spread more inspiring stories like this. Just as Adrian signaled the waiter to bring the bill, a young woman rushed into the restaurant, dripping wet from the rain. Her clothes were simple, her shoes worn, and she carried a canvas bag that had clearly seen better days. The maitre d' frowned immediately. She didn't look like the usual kind of customer here. But before he could stop her, she walked straight toward Adrian's table and sat down, catching her breath. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she said quickly, her eyes bright but nervous. "The bus broke down and, oh, I'm really sorry." Adrian blinked, utterly confused. He opened his mouth to say something, but then saw the way she tried to hide her embarrassment. Her hair damp, hands trembling slightly, cheeks red from the cold. For a second, he thought of letting her know she had the wrong table. But something in her made him stop. There was warmth, sincerity, something real that he hadn't seen in years. So, he simply smiled and said, "It's all right. You're here now." And with that one line, the strangest, most beautiful evening of his life began. Her name was Lena Carter, and she was not supposed to be there. She had come to the restaurant for a short interview, a last-minute job offer for waitressing, but in her confusion, she had misheard the manager and accidentally sat at the wrong table. When she saw Adrian smiling at her, she assumed he was the interviewer. As the conversation began, Adrian noticed how she spoke, honestly, without pretense. She talked about simple things, her love for painting, how she cared for her younger brother after their parents passed, and how she worked part-time jobs to pay his school fees. She didn't know she was sitting across from one of the city's most powerful men. She just saw a kind stranger willing to listen. Adrian, in turn, found himself laughing more than he had in months. Her stories weren't glamorous, but they were human. When she talked about struggling to pay rent or skipping meals so her brother could eat, something inside him ached, not out of pity, but admiration. She had a strength that no luxury could buy. As the dinner went on, he quietly told the waiter not to bring the bill until later. He didn't want the evening to end. When Lena realized her mistake, it was already too late. The real interviewer approached her from behind, calling her name, and her heart nearly stopped when she realized the man in front of her wasn't from the restaurant staff, but Adrian Lewis, whose face she had seen once on a billboard. Mortified, she stood up quickly, apologizing over and over. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I thought this was, oh no, I've made such a fool of myself." But Adrian only smiled, calm and warm. "No," he said softly. "You didn't. You just made my night." She looked at him, stunned. And for a brief second, their eyes locked, his filled with quiet curiosity, hers with disbelief. Then she left, hurrying out into the rain before he could say another word. That night, Adrian couldn't sleep. He had met countless women, models, executives, heiresses, but none of them had spoken to his heart the way she had. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't even know who he was. She just was, pure, genuine, and real. The next morning, he asked his assistant to find her, but all he had was her first name and a vague story about her brother. It took days, but fate, or maybe persistence, led him to a small cafe near the city's outskirts. She worked there, wiping tables with the same quiet grace that had captured his heart. When he walked in, she froze in surprise. He wasn't supposed to be there, men like him didn't belong in her world. "I owe you dinner," he said simply, placing a flower on the counter. This time, intentionally. She laughed nervously, her eyes glistening. And that was the start of something neither of them could have predicted. Over the weeks, they began meeting often. Adrian would stop by after work, helping her close the cafe, sometimes even serving customers just for fun. He learned how hard she worked to keep her brother in school and how she dreamed of opening a small art studio one day. Lena, on the other hand, learned that wealth didn't always mean happiness. Adrian told her about losing his parents young, about how his success came at the cost of loneliness and trust. Together, they found comfort in each other's imperfections. Yet, their growing closeness wasn't without challenges. The media soon caught on. Headlines like, "Billionaire CEO seen with cafe waitress," flooded the tabloids. Adrian's board members questioned his judgment, warning him that a girl like her could ruin his image. Even Lena faced whispers at work, people calling her a gold digger, saying she wasn't good enough. But every time she tried to distance herself, Adrian refused to let her. "You sat at my table by mistake," he once told her with a soft smile, but maybe it wasn't a mistake at all. Maybe it was the universe giving me what I didn't know I needed. One night, as the cafe lights dimmed and the rain returned just like the first night they met, Adrian came in quietly, holding a small wrapped canvas. "This was your dream, wasn't it?" he said, unwrapping it slowly. Inside was a painting, her own. He had bought it anonymously from a local art fair where she'd submitted her work. "It deserves a place where everyone can see it," he added. "Just like you." Lena's eyes filled with tears. She had always believed that dreams were for people with money and luck, not for girls who worked double shifts. But tonight, she felt something shift inside her. Someone believed in her, not out of pity, but love. Months later, with Adrian's quiet support, and her own relentless effort, she opened a small art and coffee studio, a warm place where anyone could come, feel seen, and express themselves. She named it, the Second Chance Cafe. When reporters asked about the name, she smiled and said, "Because sometimes life gives you a seat at the wrong table, and it ends up being exactly where you belong." Years passed, and the cafe became a symbol of hope. Adrian often sat in his favorite corner, the same way he had that night years ago, watching Lena greet customers with the same radiant smile that once melted away his loneliness. They had built a life not from wealth, but from faith, kindness, and the courage to love beyond appearances. In a world that often measures worth in status and success, their story whispered a quiet truth, that love finds you not when you're ready, but when you're real. And it all began with one empty seat, one wrong table, and one girl who didn't belong. Until she did. Speech balloon. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us spread love, hope, and second chances across the world. Dove, before you go, comment below. What would you do if fate gave you a seat at the wrong table? Would you take it?